or your community until that fire is burning and consuming you. Every great and commanding movement in the annals of the world is the triumph of enthusiasm. You know the difference between a hero and a regular soldier? 5 minutes sometimes. See, the regular soldier just stays braver 5 minutes longer, and he becomes a hero. Hang around enthusiastic people. Growth equals happiness. Stagnation equals boredom. Pastor told me he was going to cut out Sunday school. I said, why? Because it's boring. And we were having a difficult time with that church. And so I didn't want to upset the apple cart too much, but I wanted to say your problem is not with a boring Bible or Sunday school. Your problem is with a boring teacher staff. But nature has everywhere written her protest against idleness. Everything that ceases to struggle, which remains inactive, rapidly deteriorates, because it's the struggle towards an ideal, the constant effort to get higher and farther up with God, and in that case, nature, that develops manhood and character. Number 5, keep growing. Growth is happiness. Stagnation is boredom. Everything in nature that ceases to struggle stops living. Learn something every day. If you stop learning, you've stopped living. You might as well go jump in your casket, because you're no use to anyone when you've stopped learning. Number 6, help others. One of the most beautiful compensations of life is that no man can sincerely try to help another without helping himself at the same time. Number 7. Are we lost here? Make sure my notes. Okay. Number 7 on the second page. Believe in what you do. Enthusiasm ends with ism, standing for I am sold on myself. 48% of the salesmen make one call and stop. They give up. 25% of the salesmen make 2 calls and stop. 15% of all salesmen makes 3 calls and stops. 12% of all salesmen go back and back and back, and they're the ones who make 80% of the sales because they are enthused enough to be committed. When my kids gave up after trying 3 places for a job, I said I went 29 places in one day and asked for a job. Talk about being told you're not worth anything 29 times. That's a hard one to take, but you have to keep at it. 4 things worth believing in. Believe in God. This gives me purpose. Believe in ourselves. This gives me confidence. Now you say, well, that's self-esteem. But you believe in yourself as a special creation of God. But you believe in God as a supreme being by whom comparison we are nothing and we are but worms. But Winston Churchill said, we're all worms. He said, but I'm a glowworm. Believe in others. This gives me relationships. Believe in what you do. This gives me purpose. Number 8, buy into your dreams. There's a difference between a person with a dream and a dreamer. Be a person with a dream talks little and does much. But the dreamer talks on and on and on and does very little at all. 2 people were out ice fishing one time, and then on a cartoon. And the picture of the one had a little tiny hole, just hole big enough for him to get his line through and big enough to get the fish back out if he ever got one. But the second guy had a hole sculptured in the shape of a well and the size of a well, because he had the faith that that's what he was going to catch. Charles Dickens wrote his publisher along with his manuscript. He said, I have put my whole heart and soul into this book. And that's why he became one of the greatest writers in world history. 9, get some goals. These are steps towards your dream. We talked about that earlier. 10, read and listen to people who can motivate you. In the computer realm, we have a saying that garbage in equal garbage out. You are no better than what you put in your eye gate, your ear gate, and your head gate. And all the trash, daytime talk shows and soap operas, if that's what you feed yourself on, you're going to have nothing better to feed your kids in Sunday school class. So get rid of the trash. There's nothing to do but bury a man who, when he has lost his dreams. In the 1700s, there was a little-known guy who was a cobbler. This cobbler was a Christian, and he put a map of the world on his wall. Every day, as he cobbled shoes, he'd pray, look at that map and pray. One day, he got so excited that he went to a ministerial meeting and told of his dream of sending missionaries around the world. But he was told by the elders of the church, they said, young man, sit down. When God wants to save the heathen, he'll do it without your help or ours either. So he went back to his cobbler shop, cobbled shoes, and prayed, and prayed, and prayed. So William Carey heard from God, and he went to India and literally became the father of modern missions. Keep things around you that will motivate you. Because if you come to the end of the road and you discover that you didn't achieve what you had wanted to in life or what God expected, either you didn't want it bad enough or you tried to haggle with God over the price tag. Your Sunday school class will know you by your enthusiasm or your lack of it. Before we move on, any questions? Apologize if I'm moving too fast. Pardon? Buy into your dreams. Buy. Yeah. I have a bad habit talking fast. That's why I only cheated you out of one word, because I didn't think you'd want to write as fast as I talk. Any comments? Or I think this is where we've lost the battle for our teenagers. It's not in refusing to compromise, because teenagers have proven that they want standards, they want restrictions, they want guidelines. But we've lost them, frankly, because we've had nothing to offer them. One of the greatest capsulizations of church growth I've ever heard says that people don't come to your church not because they don't like God. Everybody wants, 95% of people in America believe in God. They don't come to your church not because they don't like God. They don't come to your church because they don't like you. That's mean, isn't it? But that is the truth. And as long as that can be said about the IPCC, it will be my fault more than anyone else's. And for God's sake, we have to change, become more relevant and more Christ-like, and preach more of Christ in the world. And it has not one stick of anything to do with compromise. That's a lie from hell. We can maintain our ground and grow, but we have blamed God and the Holy Ghost for our laziness and our unconcern and our unawareness of how to reach a lost and dying world. I feel bad talking about it, because presumably the fact that you came out today means that you're among the top dedicated people in this district. So, but on the other hand, if you're that dedicated, then we can stand a little bit of truth today, can't we? Any questions or comments? Sorry for going so fast. When I go to Bolivar, there's a dear old lady who punches her neighbor, and she says, "Get ready to listen fast." Turn to the beige paper, and we'll have to really go through this if we're going to come close to that time. A Texas Ranger was aggravated because this Mexican bandit would cross over the Rio Grande and just hit one bank after another, one stagecoach, hit the trains, and scoot across the border, and nobody could catch him. So finally one day this bright young Texas Ranger trailed him, tracked him across the Rio Grande, down through the valleys and up the mountains, and saw him go into a town, and he stood on the hid up in the rocks and the hills, and watched this bandit as he mingled with his friends on the city street, and finally saw him go in the saloon. And Ranger sneaked into the saloon, walked in behind him, put his .44 back to his head, cocked it, and he said, "All right, Gomez, I've tracked you here, and I'll give you 5 or 10 seconds to tell me where you put all that money you've stolen from Texas the past 2 years." And Gomez just stood there stunned, scared to death. And this little Mexican walked up. He said, "Mr. Ranger, Gomez doesn't speak English, and if you'd like, I'll be his interpreter for you." And Texas Ranger said, I sure appreciate that. You tell him what I said." And he told him what he said, and the Gomez said, "All right, this guy's crazy. He's going to blow my head off if I don't tell him. And you tell him that it's out in the well back behind the Rodriguez home, and I got it suspended halfway down that well. Everything. I haven't spent a penny these past 2 years. I've been saving it to go on a great vacation. I was going to get out of here before I got caught." And the little Mexican turned around. He said, "This Gomez is the bravest man I've ever met. Gomez says that he's not afraid to die." So a little Mexican retired that night. So a lot depends on our ability to communicate. I hope you don't, I probably shouldn't say this, but a guy in Texas in 1959, he got real upset that they took Alaska in the Union, and Texas was no longer the biggest state in the Union, so he made his way all the way up Alaska. And one guy gave him a hard time. He said, "If you give us a hard time, we'll split Alaska, and Texas would be the 3rd largest state." But he went into this place, and he said, "You tell me how I can become a citizen of Alaska." And he said, "Well, you got to do 3 things. One, you got to take this drink without stopping, and then you got to shoot a polar bear, and then you got to kiss an Eskimo girl." And so he did the first and walked out stone drunk and just staggered down the street, missing for 3 or 4 days. Came back, just showed up all at once. His clothes were tore off. His scalp was ripped off. There's nothing but blood and skin hanging all over the place. And he walked up to that same guy. He said, "Now you tell me where that Eskimo girl is I'm supposed to shoot." Sometimes our communication is just as off target. You got to do things like that after lunch. People sleeping. But the average American spends 70% of his active hours communicating with his mouth. Since 1955, a Kaiser Aluminum Company reported, since 1955, 50% of the cost of running the American economy has been related to communications. President Ford said, "If I went back to college again, I'd concentrate on 2 areas, learning to write and learning to speak before an audience." He said, "Nothing in life is more important than the ability to communicate effectively." And that's what Sunday school teachers have to do, not just in the classroom, but on a daily basis. And if you're worth your salt, you will visit your students in their home. You have to communicate. And as Brother Gardner said, you have to relate to young people. You don't have to get down in the ditches with them, but you have to speak their language so that they know that you're not living back in Model 8 days. So, 3,000 college students in a survey said their greatest fear was in speaking. So how can we become better communicators? And this lesson is for me because I've been told I've been too starchy all my life, so I'm working on that. But one, communicators believe in what they say. They speak with conviction. Words are the means, not the end of our work. Language is but the instrument. Conviction does the work. Now, when I was in trying to learn to be a teacher, we had a student teach, and I used 1 Corinthians 13 as my lesson, and I put on the bulletin board, on the blackboard, it's possible to give your body for the cause of Christ and still go to hell. Well, that's what Paul was trying to say. So I'll give my body to be burned and have not charity. It's all vanity. But what I was trying to say in that lesson, you can be a communist and have conviction. You can be an atheist. You can even be a Democrat maybe and have conviction. I don't know. You can't tell nowadays. Now I'm really in trouble. But if you can have conviction about God as a cause, or about the personhood of Jesus Christ as a cause, and still be lost, and still have conviction. In 1968, I heard Richard Nixon give his last night campaign speech, and if I hadn't listened to the words, I would have said for sure he was a Pentecostal preacher. He ran that stage and moved his arms and stirred thousands, had them on their feet, like a Pentecostal service. Not an ounce of godly blood was probably flowing through his veins. You can be convicted and yet not be godly. So why can't we be godly and be convicted? Because we're godly. And why can't it be demonstrated in our Sunday school class and in our churches, and let the people say that church is different because they really mean what they say? They're a little off the wall sometimes, but they're sincere. Now I like that about a church. Ordinary people become extraordinary communicators when they're fired up with conviction. The most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire, someone said. There are no boring subjects, but there are only boring speakers. So, you think the richest people in the world are the geniuses, or the most successful salespeople are the geniuses. That somehow we relate education and intelligence to success. I have a saying that most success in ministry is not related to intellect, but more to energy and drive. That explains why we have so many stupid leaders. But the successful people in the world aren't the smart ones. They're the driven ones. And the smart people just stand back there marveling how could someone that dumb get so far. But because they outwork them, and they outburn them, and they outlast them. And I tell young pastors, if you're going to be a successful pastor, you have to outthink your people. You have to outwork them. You have to outlove them. And you have to outlast them. That's sometimes the hard part. It's number 2, great communicators believe in the people in which they speak. Now this is pretty hard. Looking at some of you back there, it makes it harder. Just kidding. But if you don't believe in what the people are that you're speaking to, and it makes it easy for me to talk like this, because I see people with potential. I see people who love God enough and love their work in the church enough to come out and give up their Saturday, and thinking they're going to get some teaching method to take it back and getting a lot of philosophy on talking. But because there's potential in you, it makes it a lot easier for me. That's why pastors give up. They think there's no hope for the people, so they leave. But the speaker believed, or the hearers believe that they can respond, and the speaker believes that they'll get a response, because there is no small audience. There's only small communicators. There's only small teachers. And Brother Gardner talked about numbers in the church, but it's not. God does not dislike small churches. He better not, because 80% of churches in America are 75 and under. So there would be no Christians, basically, if it weren't for small churches. And so this church functions in a way that the big church, Freeba's Avenue Church, God up there, or Rod Parsley, can't touch the people that this church ministers to. So it would be anathema to anyone who say that God is against small churches, but He is against small vision. See, There's a big difference there. People follow leaders not for who the leader is or how what the title of the leader is, but how the leader makes them feel. If you want to be a great pastor and Sunday school teacher, get your people to feel like that you think they're the greatest people on earth. But the trick is, you better believe that, because they'll sense that. And the biggest mistake we could do is trying to talk convincingly and put our highest priority upon expressing our ideas and feelings. And what people mostly want is to be listened to. They want to be respected and understood. And the moment people see that they are being understood, they become more motivated to understand your point of view. And that's why these cults are so successful, because they sense a sincerity from the leaders. The Mormon leader, they sense a sincerity from him, and that wins them over. And studies have shown when families move into a community, it doesn't matter what denomination they're a part of, they go to the church that's friendliest and has more programs to be the kids. There are 4 B's of successful speaking. 1, believe in your God. Without this, you'll only do what you can do. 2, believe in yourself. Without this, you won't do anything at all. 3, believe in your subject. Without this, you do it, but without conviction. 4, believe in your audience. Without that, you'll do it, but no one will listen to you or apply it. Because great communicators believe in their people. People believe in their communicators. 3, great communicators live what they say. They have credibility. All communications has 3 basic components: intellect, emotion, and volition. Or in other words, thought, feeling, and action. So whatever it is I want to communicate to another individual, it involves something I know, something I feel, and something I'm doing. And all 3 essentials are personally owned or felt deeply by the communicator. Because 2 things a leader can't do or borrow: he can't borrow a vision, and he can't borrow a message. So the first 6 months of a pastor's ministry, communication precedes credibility. He has to communicate before he can get credibility. In other words, what you say equals what you are. The rest of his ministry, credibility precedes communication. What you are equals what you say. Now, Howard Hendricks gives that to us, and a lot of wisdom there. Number 4, great communicators know when to say it, and that's the hard part. That's always been difficult for me. Someone said a stone thrown at the right time is better than gold driven at the wrong time. How to know when to say what? There comes a moment when we have to stop revving up the car and shove it in gear. Even if you have the world's best idea, it'll do you no good unless you act upon it. People who want milk shouldn't sit on a stool in the middle of the field in hopes that the cow will back up to it. Reminds me of a Kentuckian got a new tractor, and he's plowing up a storm and shift the gears, got the thing stuck in reverse, and before you knew it, he unplowed 30 acres. That's only evangelists can say that. So. Tips for good timing: 1, be audience-oriented instead of subject-oriented. 2, have enough self-confidence to take a risk. Almost all timing is feedback from what you sense from your people. When I see people shuffle these papers around, I know that we're not in sync. And you folks are probably ahead of me. And 3, be impact conscious instead of image conscious. By impact, the job of teaching is to change, to impact, not to create an image for the teacher. And a lot of pastors fail because they want to create an image. They want the image of being a great pastor. But they need to understand that their first job is to impact their people. And 4, create a responsive crowd. Almost all results are due to timing in speaking. 5, great communicators know how to say it. They know how to say things to impact people. There's a direct correlation between predictability and impact. The higher your predictability, in other words, the more that the people can predict you and know what to expect from you, the lower your impact. As Brother Gardner said about the service. The lower your predictability, the higher the impact. If they don't know what to expect from you, the more that you can change them, and the more successful you'll be. Someone talking about preaching said, get the best illustration to grab the attention of your people or of your class, and then get the most challenging summary of that lesson you can possibly come up with. And then they said, something I don't know how to do, put them as close together as possible. 6 great communicators know why they say it. Preach for a verdict, they tell us. Don't preach or teach anything unless you know what you want to happen at the end of your lesson. A politician says, if they like me, I'm a success. A speaker will say, if they applaud, I was a success. But a teacher says, if their lives have changed, God used me. See, not unless those lives are changed. And what irks me about Sunday school teachers, and I'm sorry, but you're different because you're coming to learn. And I mentioned that in that article, when is a school not a school? What irks me is that teachers